vocabulary into the pre-voiceless context of Detroit African American English indexes a contrasted identity with Midwestern whites, as well as a linguistic affiliation with the South. The overall effect is that the Detroit African American English system, for these speakers at least, aligns with the progressive Southern vowel system for I, including that of the Detroit Southern white community, while it indexes its opposition with Northern whites. The changes affecting I in Detroit's Southern white neighborhoods follows a very different trajectory, which Edgar 96 also demonstrates is also very socially settled. I think I is socially settled, no matter where you go, or who you're looking at. I really do. And finally, disorganization is a relative notion, which can best be quantified with reference to a non-diphthongal vowel such as R. I have demonstrated a method for precisely quantifying disorganization by subtracting the F1 to a midpoint value from the other values. This is an easy method to implement. It gives really hard numbers that do well in quantitative analysis. And these measurements make it possible to quantify both length and direction of the flight.
I'm glad you asked questions, Terry.
I think this is a great method, and I'm going to start doing this. I like your conclusions about the spread to the African American speakers and the ingredients. I do have a question. I've noticed allophony in the concepts, that oftentimes the concept of the voice is much lower than that for the voices. So it might show more movement in F1. The black target's not in the time. So I don't know if you saw that when you got it or not. Of course, the relative movement might be the same or greater, but the endpoint might be low, not as much. Rather than just wanted to account that we saw an allophonic distribution of where the midpoint concepts were.
We talked about onset relative to
The midpoint where the midpoint.
No, between midpoint and onset instead of just midpoint and onset.
No, the midpoint for the onset. Well,
I didn't look at onset.
okay.
I did not look at onset. I would like to look at it in the future. Just based on my midpoint offset measurement, I don't think I'm going to have very much movement from onset to midpoint, but in an ideal world, it is best to look, I think, at all three temporal locations, onset, midpoint, and offset. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. Do the same exact measure between midpoint and offset or onset and midpoint. So it'd be very easy to do if you have time to do it.
I'm not a technologist, so my question has to do just as we saw pretty well about traditional Southern white and progressive Southern white. I was wondering how do you classify that?
Oh, let me just briefly say what those are. Okay. Traditional Southern white pattern is to have tied but tight. Okay, so to have the diphthong in the pre-voices. And we still find this in many areas of the South, mainly the former plantation areas. Now, the progressive pattern is to have across-the-board glide leading, like I have, in every single context. And we find that in the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. We find it in some parts of Texas. And it's on the move in the South. This is a change in progress.
I just have a question about your conclusion at the end, the extension of the more monophthongal I for voiceless environments. Because the Detroit white community does not have that, the monophthongal variant at all, isn't the more likely explanation is that they don't, it's really just a way of distinguishing speech from surrounding white speech. And since the I monophthongal variant is not a question at all in white Detroit English, then it could extend naturally.
Northern white.
Yeah.
Not Southern white.
Yeah. Then it can extend naturally to more environments that you get it before voiceless.
Exactly.
Right. But
was so important to the speakers. They all identified very, very strongly with the South. And what we need to keep in mind here, the reason that I make the arguments that I do is because traditionally in the South, African American speakers maintained the diphthong in the pre-voiceless environment. So something has changed. Something has changed. And in data collected by Walt Wolfram in 1969, we also find a diphthong in the pre-voiceless environment. So something has changed. And I argue that it's leveling, but that it's leveling that's ideologically mediated.
Yeah, but it can level because the surrounding white speakers don't do it.
Well, but the South beyond it.
But this is in Detroit.
I mean, I do argue that it indexes a difference between the whites. I do, but it's also so socially salient and so strongly identified with the South that I think it's ideologically mediated.
Question sort of follows up on that. You say that it's socially salient across that, and one thing that kind of goes along with social salience is that people talk about it, and Phillips spoke of Is that the main mechanism whereby, when you think about an individual, how does an individual learn that it's socially salient? Does it require explicit metapragmatic commentary? Somebody has to say, don't do that, it sounds southern, or do it, it sounds southern.
I don't think it has to be explicit. I think,
How does that happen?
yeah, that's a good question. That's the question, right? That's what we're all trying to figure out. Nobody's figured that out yet.
Just wanted to do
I'm sorry we can't answer that long